I'm Teisha Bader, and in the news, Israel's President Isaac Herzog's visit to the United States to Washington and his address to a joint session of Congress. The speech coming at a time of great debate and divide within Israeli society over the judicial reforms issue, as well as reported tensions between the U.S. and Israel on that same topic. Well, to discuss Herzog's important speech and how he and his words were received is CEO of the Conference of Presidents of Major American Jewish Organizations, William Daroff, who is in Washington for the speech, joining us now from New York. William, thank you so much for taking the time.
My pleasure to be here. I'm a valued watcher and viewer, and I'm happy to be here with you.
Thank you so much. So you were there in person. I have to tell you that personally, watching the speech, I was so moved. I literally started crying when President Herzog walked into the chamber and was just so moved by him being there and also by the response of those who welcomed him so warmly and enthusiastically. What were your feelings like being there in person?
It was wonderful to be there. I just pulled out of my pocket the ticket to the event, which is something that I will certainly cherish. It was really a room where there were 1,000 people or so, 535 members of Congress, minus a few misguided folks who were boycotting, and about that same number of spectators. Each member of Congress basically gets to bring one guest. So there were 1,000 people there who were cheering on the strength and the vitality and the vibrance of the U.S.-Israel relationship. And President Herzog is just a wonderful bipartisan, nonpartisan, above the fray purveyor of the importance of that relationship between the U.S. and Israel, that it is just was remarkable to be a part of it and to sort of cut through, I think the technical term is the surus that's out there about the relationship, about the domestic situation in Israel, about the situation here and everywhere, and just to spend an hour plus celebrating the U.S.-Israel relationship and celebrating the 75th anniversary of Israel and the 75th anniversary of the relationship between the U.S. and Israel was remarkable.
And I think you're right. You touched on something about President Herzog. I think he does convey this sort of voice of reason, this just decent individual who tries to really be above politics and seems very committed to the Jewish people in general, and of course to the state of Israel. And I think that response that he got, that energy that was in the room, was directly related to that person the person he projects. It was just really a wonderful thing to see.
You're absolutely correct. It's very genuine from him. It's literally in his kishkas, and genetically. He made reference to his father, who was the president of Israel and spoke at a joint session of Congress in 1991. One of the very few times, I think maybe the second time in history, that a father and son have both addressed a joint session of Congress. He talked about his grandfather, who was present in helping to lobby President Truman to recognize Israel as a state in 1948. And in fact, he invited and noted that President Truman's grandson was in attendance in the congressional chamber.
That was really something.
It was remarkable, and I had the chance to talk to him afterwards, the grandson, and it was great. And it's the connection between the U.S. and Israel is something that he remembers from his grandfather. His grandfather, Harry Truman, died when he was 15. His grandmother, Bess Truman, died, I think, when he was 25. So he had legitimate relationships, adult-to-adult relationships with President Truman, Mrs. Truman, which is remarkable to think now. It seems like it was a century ago, but 75 years ago, that living history is present. And that living history was present in the grandson of President Truman, as well as in the grandson of Harav, the chief rabbi, Herzog, the grandfather of President Herzog.
It was really so moving. And also just to see President Herzog, he walked into the chamber and really everybody wanted to shake his hand from across the aisle, from the range of politicians and from Democrats and Republicans. It really seemed to, as you said, minus a few people who were not there. In general, it was quite a sight to behold, and something that we would like to see more of course.
Yeah, I've been in and around Washington for decades, and there are a few issues that bring together Republicans and Democrats, that bring together Northerners and Southerners and Easterners and Westerners and Christians and Jews and Blacks and whites and Latinos. And Israel at the moment is certainly one of those few issues that enjoys that broad support. There was a resolution in Congress and the House of Representatives yesterday that I know you reported on, where there were 411 members.
412.
412. Thank you very much. Members of Congress who voted for a resolution declaring that Israel is not a racist state, declaring that the U.S.-Israel relationship is a major priority for the United States, and only 9 people voted against it. And that proportion, 412 to 9, I'll take any day. I think that's where the American people are as it relates to the U.S.-Israel relationship. It's obviously where the House of Representatives is when you get down to the brass tacks. And that's what we saw very much in the Capitol today, were folks gathering together, applauding together, standing together. I didn't count how many standing ovations there were, but there were dozens. And in fact, President Herzog afterwards joked about how everybody was getting their exercise on their thigh muscles because we were going up and down so much. He joked that at a reception afterwards. It was really wonderful. And to see, again, Republicans and Democrats standing together, people that on their day jobs as it relates to U.S. politics are at each other's throats, putting down their weaponry of choice and joining hands together in support for a strong Israel relationship is precisely where the U.S.-Israel relationship should be. It should be beyond the sort of usual catcalls and messiness of everyday politics. And today it was, and that's a place we need to all work to ensure it can stay above the fray.
And Herzog really said it so well, that exact sentiment, talking about how families in Israel were about to sit down to dinner at the time when he was giving his speech, and many families who within the same family are on different sides of the judicial reforms debate. Let's say, for example, some going out to protest, others feeling like the judicial reforms are due and are the right thing to do. And yet everyone sits down to dinner, right? And everyone is still a family. And he made that comparison as far as the U.S.-Israel relationship, which I thought was very smart and very apt, saying that at the end of the day, we are a family. We can have major disagreements. We can have differing opinions on a number of things, but at the end of the day, it is a relationship that is so solidly built and is founded on so many important things, shared values, shared history, that is larger than any conflict we might have.
Absolutely. The relationship is certainly stronger than the day-to-day rigmarole between countries. It is stronger than any one given president or one given prime minister. It is a relationship that is built on the foundations of American democracy, of Western values, and it's one that has been strong for 75 years and God willing will be strong for many, many, many more years ahead. It is a relationship that brings a benefit to the United States. It brings a benefit to the state of Israel. It brings a benefit to the world as people see the extension of U.S. power through Israel. It really helps to balance out against the forces that are out there trying to push against Western values. They're trying to push terrorism. They're trying to push extremism. And I think that relationship is important. And the president also focused on Iran. And Iran is a situation that where they are seeking very quickly to develop some sort of nuclear capacity, where they are involved in all sorts of malevolent activities around the region. And this is a situation where the U.S. and Israel need to stay of one mind and stay focused and stay with great attention on in order to ensure that the world realizes that Iran cannot be appeased and their evil doing should not be countenanced. And that also brought widespread bipartisan applause across the board. And it's interesting, sometimes you see at the State of the Union address, the vice president, so President Biden's giving the State of the Union address, and the vice president and the Democrats will all stand when he's talking about Democratic agenda issues, and the speaker and all the Republicans will sit. And there are relatively few times during the State of the Union address when everybody's standing. And if you look at the picture, the vice president and the Speaker of the House, the Democratic vice president, the Republican Speaker of the House, were very much in unison, going up and down with the crowd. And that demonstration of the bipartisan, solid, wall-to-wall support for the state of Israel was, again, quite fulfilling to be a part of. And the energy is really going to be incredibly important for continuing to ensure that the U.S.'s relationship stays on track and stays focused. And President Herzog did a yeoman's effort of ensuring that today.
I wanted to ask your opinion about President Herzog, as we both said, doesn't really get involved, but is trying to sort of be a bridge in this judicial reform issue. However, in the speech, twice, he stressed the importance of a strong judiciary and an independent judiciary, which was, I'm not saying that that expressed a particular opinion, but at the same time, he was reinforcing that line of thinking. How did you take that, and how was that received?
It was received well. I think that a lot of us, raised an eyebrow, smiled when he said it, because it was a clear message. But I think it's a message that is an important message. I think it's one that the vast majority of Israelis will agree on, and obviously how they interpret those words is in the eyes of the beholder. But I think it speaks to the idea that Israel is a strong democracy. Israel has strong systems in place. And this 75-year tradition of a strong and independent judiciary is something that is an important component of what makes Israel Israel, and that is a goal that he has. And President Herzog has been very much at the forefront of trying to bring Israeli politicians together, to bring Israeli civil society together, to find some common ground and to find consensus here. And I think he was expressing that hope that he can be an instrumentality of bringing the Israeli people together, and recognizing that there is this foundational piece of what of importance to Israel in having a strong and independent judiciary. So I think it was totally appropriate. I think how Israel, the country, interprets it will be based on the eye of the beholder. But I think it's important that he doesn't hide those issues and move away from them, but rather confronts them and puts them in the proper context. We have all sorts of issues here, and he talked about that and our sort of messy democracy here in America. And I think it's important for people to recognize that these things aren't often as they should be in a textbook, and that democracy is sometimes messy, and that popular opinion is messy, and finding coalitions and building them is messy. And hopefully, President Herzog will continue to be a vehicle for trying to move Israel forward and to trying to bring the Israeli people together, and to reduce the level of divisiveness, which is in Israel, which then bleeds over into the diaspora.
Right, of course. And, President Biden has expressed that he's deeply concerned about what's happening in Israel, at the same time giving his support, seeing, democracy in action, and lauding that, but expressing concern. This is not a secret. And he finally had a phone call with Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu the other night, and they discussed, apparently, it is believed they discussed the reasonableness bill that is now being pushed through in the Knesset, which is likely to be voted on Sunday, and Netanyahu giving him some assurances that, yes, it will pass, but I'm going to try and reach broad consensus. And then Biden inviting Netanyahu to meet with him. Didn't specifically say at the White House, but to meet with him, which was an invite that has been long awaited. So, as Herzog said, there are disagreements, there are conflicts, but it seems like perhaps something is being, maybe there is some hope on the horizon for some meeting of the minds on this issue, or getting a little closer to that as far as Netanyahu and Biden. What do you think?
I think that there is a concerted effort by both the prime minister and the president to decrease the volume, to decrease the pressure, to ensure that there are high levels of communication and understanding, and a recognition that both the United States and Israel, both Prime Minister Netanyahu and President Biden, are men of good conscience who are pushing forward with agenda issues that they think are in the best interest of their countries. I think that this phone call that you mentioned is very important. The fact that Prime Minister Netanyahu and President Biden will be meeting here in the United States sometime this fall is important to push through that. It's important to remember that the number one foreign visitor, the number one foreign head of state to meet with President Obama over his 8 years was Bibi Netanyahu. More than the British prime minister, more than the French prime minister, more than the Canadian, it was Bibi Netanyahu. And that's despite the well-known disagreements, policy and otherwise, between the two of them. And so that level of communication at the top is very important. And I feel like the phone call earlier this week, and certainly President Herzog's visit and discussions with senior administration officials, including the president, will help move that relationship forward. The relationship is too important to get hung up over sort of trivial matters of picking up a phone call and having an invitation and coming. If you want to have a disagreement, come have a disagreement in person. Having this sort of probationary period of not having the prime minister come, I think was unfortunate. And I'm hopeful that the White House recognizes that and that we've moved past that.
I want to also mention, you spoke about Truman's grandson being a special invited guest of President Herzog. He also had Leah Golden there, the mother of Hadar, one of the soldiers, along with Oron Shaul, who were killed and whose remains are being held by terror group Hamas in Gaza since 2014. It is unimaginable, the pain that these families must be enduring. But Leah Golden was there. She sat next to Michal Herzog and was so warmly received. And that was also just so moving. And to once again raise that very important issue of bringing the bodies of these young men home to Israel to be buried, and also releasing the 2 civilians that are still being held by Hamas.
Yes, it was wonderful of President Herzog to invite Leah Golden to be a part of his official delegation, to fly with him from Israel to Washington to be a part of the meetings. She was in the meeting yesterday with Secretary of State Blinken, where I understand they had, according to the release that was put out, that there was a significant amount of time discussed about the international humanitarian law violations that are occurring because the 4 are being held captive. It is the 9th yahrzeit, the 9th anniversary of the death of Hadar this coming Sunday. And it is a tragedy. It is a shanda that this family for 9 years has been kept from really closing the chapter on their beautiful son, who was murdered after a ceasefire, after an American negotiated ceasefire, a ceasefire negotiated by then Secretary of State John Kerry in the administration of then President Obama and then Vice President Biden, where there is a clear responsibility for the United States, because it was our ceasefire that we negotiated, to work to ensure their return. I think it, again, was wonderful of President Herzog to invite them. I know that Leah Golden will continue here to New York, where she will be with President Herzog, with the Secretary General of the United Nations, Guterres, and have other important meetings as well. And it is a story that I wish there was more attention focused on, because it is really a tragedy for those 4 families, and something that America should use and the world should use its power, its resources, its influence, and its relationships to remedy.
And William, you mentioned briefly there were several members of Congress that were not at the speech to hear President Herzog. Most of them made it very vocally clear that they would be doing that. Some just didn't show up, like Bernie Sanders apparently didn't show up, but did not make a statement about it, like some of the other. There were several progressives who said that they would not be there. How do you take that? Do you think it's people were just not surprised and just sort of didn't want to give it any more attention, or how was it received in the chamber?
There were no empty seats in the chamber, so it was not clear, as say it was when Prime Minister Netanyahu addressed Congress in 2015, where there was a major boycott of 40-some members of Congress, 40-plus members of Congress, where there were rows of seats that were empty. The situation here was one where there was standing room only. There were members of Congress who didn't have seats, former members of Congress, and others down there who didn't have seats. So it was not noticeable. I think the fact that it was just a handful, I didn't see what the final count was, but I think less than 10 members of Congress actually spoke out loud and said, we're not coming. And I don't know who else had conflicts. The fact that it is so small, I think speaks to the fringe nature of that crowd who see whenever they say Israel, they look for something to be critical about. And I think that, again, much like the House vote, where there were only 9 members of Congress who voted against Israel, I think that this too shows that the same sort of fringe minority is just that, a fringe minority. And I wish the news media would treat them as such, because they are very far from the vast majority of Americans, the vast majority of Congress who celebrate Israel, who celebrate the U.S.-Israel relationship.
Which was abundantly clear today. I hope that a lot of people see that incredible enthusiasm and real joy at having President Herzog at the Capitol today. And I know you're going to be hosting him. Talk a bit about the event you have coming up.
Yeah, so here in New York, we have an event with UJA Federation of New York that the Conference of Presidents of Major American Jewish Organizations is co-hosting, where the president will be meeting with members of the Jewish community here locally and engaging in an interview style format, where again, it'll be nice for various pieces of the greater New York area community and other national members of the Jewish communal leadership to meet, to engage with him in one setting. So I'm excited that for the opportunity for that. They've also announced that there'll be a young leadership meeting with the president on Friday, where young members of the Jewish community will be engaging with him as well. So I'm excited that he's here back in New York. The president spent a lot of his childhood here. He went to Ramaz Day School when he was a teenager, and so he has great connections here, and obviously he's excited to be here, and his excitement was incredibly palpable, both for those watching during his speech and for those of us who had the pleasure and honor to engage with him after the speech. He was very much flying high and excited about the energy, and it's really for Zionists in the crowd celebrating the 75th anniversary of Israel. This was a wonderful gift.
Absolutely. Well, William, we thank you so much for joining us and for taking the time and giving us some of the experience, what it was like to be there in person for President Herzog's speech, and to feel that energy and that love. Really, it really felt like there was love in the room from Democrats, from Republicans, that Israel, as you said, is this uniting issue, which we hope continues to be the case and is louder and stronger than any disagreements, which there will be. There are things that are being worked out and hopefully will be worked out, and there probably will continue to be, because that's just the nature of things. But the display today was really heartwarming.
Yeah, you spoke of President Herzog's talking about family disputes, and it just as you said, it reminds me of any Shabbat table. Family members disagreeing about this or that. That's very much who we are as a people. It's very much who Israel is as a people. And again, right-sizing that, recognizing that together in unity, we will move forward as a people. Israel will move forward as a country, and the U.S.-Israel relationship will continue to grow and flourish.
CEO of the Conference of Presidents of Major American Jewish Organizations, William Daroff, joining us from New York. And we thank him so much for taking the time to be here with us on JBS. Thank you, William. Best to you.
My honor. Thank you so much. And thank you, JBS.
And thank you, as always, to our director, Sloan Copeland, managing director, Dara Golub, to our transmissions manager, John McDevitt, technical manager, Michael Paley, and to our producer, Carol Lilienthal. And thank you for watching In the News.